Line's good.
Never on.
Whoa.
Hard. Hardly.
Come on, Brent.
Line's good.
Got real close.
I hear high, right?
Try and hit 2/3.
Have they saved it for her? Yes, they have.
Ooh, welcome to Game of Stones, everybody. I am Sean Graham Scott. Alongside, as always, hello, Scott.
Sean, I got to ask you a question today.
All right.
All right. So you rejoined our team on a Monday night, and I unfortunately injured myself somehow and wasn't able to play. So why don't you fill me in on how the game went? I haven't looked at it yet.
So, yeah, big game Monday night. It was the last game of the draw. And from what I gathered, I had missed the previous two games, and combined, the team had scored 1 point in those two games. Scott, I'm pleased to announce that in one game on Monday night, we doubled our point total from the previous two games. Yes, we scored 2 points on Monday night en route to a 9-2 loss in a game that I played like somebody who hadn't played in a month.
Interesting. Okay, so we're going down to D, but good news is Barbucks are in play.
Barbucks potentially are on the table. Yeah, there's 5 games left. So the last draw, we are in D. Whoever finishes first in D, $5 a person in Barbucks for the start of next season. That, Scott, is why we lift all those weights in the summer.
Yeah, maybe I lifted too many weights, and that's what happened to my body. But I hope to be back on the ice Saturday. We have a rare weekend game as we try to make up all the weeks we missed. So I'm hoping to be there in form and hoping that we get back to our D division ways with you returning to the helm as our skipper.
Yeah, so we went undefeated the last time we were in D with me skipping, move up to C, and we got our brains beat in collectively. Everybody had a chance to skip, and we all did poorly. So we're back on our way down to D. That included 1 default. So that's where we stand on Monday nights. Thursday night, my Thursday night team kicks off tomorrow, the final draw as well. So we'll have to see how that goes, where I believe we are also in play for Barbucks potentially starting out after what has been a tough season so far. Mostly, I would say, due to injury. So as opposed to our ability. I don't think you go from an A team down to a D level team just on its own, right? And injuries have been involved.
Yeah, ideally you wouldn't make that go, but who knows?
Well, who's not going down to D, Scott? Anybody who's currently playing in Prince George. The Women's World Curling Championship is ongoing out in Prince George as we record this, coming off a very fun game this afternoon in the east part of the country. It was the morning draw out in Prince George, Canada and Sweden. Canada gets off to a big lead, getting 3 in the first, then back-to-back steals for a 5-0 lead. But as we say all the time, curling is a game of runs, and Anna Hasselberg and her team came back in the second half, had potentially a chance to tie. Very difficult shot to tie the game in the 9th then. She couldn't make it, and Carrie Anderson ends up winning that game in the 10th. But a really good comeback for Anna Hasselberg. I tweeted after the game that was a fun game that would not have been a fun game if it was only 8-end games. So I continue to be a fan of the 10-end version. And I don't know, Scott, I haven't watched all that much of the Women's World Championship for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is that it's hard to get when TSN isn't showing it, when Canada isn't playing. It's not as readily available as it has been in years past. But overall, what has your impression been of the action so far?
So I've enjoyed watching what I've been able to. Like you, I haven't been able to watch outside of TSN. Not for lack of trying, but more for lack of having to work during the day, and that 5 p.m. draw is sort of the best time. But I'm like enjoying it. I think the no tick rule, I don't know if it's a mistake to do it at the World Championships. If you want to do this at the junior Bs, with all respect to the junior Bs, like that, I think that's where you test these rules, although the skill level isn't quite as high there. We've seen these things tested in the Grand Slams, That's probably the better test bench for these kind of events. So I do feel like the games have been more in doubt than they would be otherwise, given that, Carrie Anderson had to deal with center guards in that 10th end where she wouldn't have had to otherwise, given a made tick. But overall, I'm enjoying the quality of the play, and I guess I have to apologize to Denmark again, Sean.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Denmark and Madeline Dupont, 5-2. We'll come back to the tick rule because I have stuff I want to say about that. But this is by far the most important thing. Madeline Dupont is now, Scott, taking the Jamie Murphy role of the player who you just completely dismiss all the time and then comes out and wins games that you don't expect them to win, as they currently sit at 5-2. That does include the Scotland matchup, which they did not have to play. So they're 4-2 in the games they've played, 5-2 overall. And I tweeted this too, just as a side note. World Curling Federation, please just add the wins on for the teams that haven't yet had the Scotland slot on their schedule. Just put the win there so that we don't have to look at the standings and be like, oh, who do they still get the Scotland win or not? Let's just put it there. We know it's there. So why are you making this more complicated than it needs to be? But they do have that win. And they get Italy, Japan, Norway, Sweden, and the Americans left. So going to be a tough row to hoe for Madeline Dupont. Scott, they are 5-2. I think you had them as like a 2-win team or something. What do you have to say to the entire country of Denmark?
Not much. No, I'm going to stick with this. They beat. They beat the Korean team today that started 6-0 and an extra end on a tough shot that went to a measure.
Not that anyone saw it.
No, that's my TSN crapped out, right?
Everyone. Yeah, TSN crapped out. It was like they pulled an NBC.
Yeah, and then I was like, I had another thing going on, so I couldn't, I couldn't deal with it. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens when they lost to Canada pretty convincingly. Anderson was in control of that game all the way yesterday on Tuesday. They've still got to play the Japanese team, the Swiss, of course, and they lost to Sweden also convincingly. So it's they'll be around the playoff hunt, but I still don't think they're medal contenders.
Yeah, maybe not, but I mean, Italy, Japan, Norway, maybe not Japan in terms of wins, but if you look at Italy, Norway, those are going to be their two big games. 7-6 probably might be enough, depending on how the head-to-head matchups go, who else is in that neighborhood once we get to the end of the week. But it's fun to have Madeline Dupont in the mix, I think.
Yeah, that's fair. And I've sort of maybe blocked out last year's playoff appearance for them. So fun stuff there for them. Just getting back to the tick rule really quick. One of the things that I think is interesting about the idea of the tick rule, and something that people have talked about as maybe a criticism of it, is that, well, you work the whole game to get that hammer late in the game in a 10th end, potentially an extra end, and you're kind of taking away some of the effectiveness of having that and what a team works for. But since you know that that's coming, maybe that influences decision-making earlier in the game. Maybe you make some more aggressive choices to get that extra point, potentially go a little harder for a 2 earlier in a game. So you're not in a situation where it's tied coming home. Maybe you're looking now that you really want to be up 1 coming home, potentially up 2 coming home. And I don't know, maybe it just forces the play a little bit more and doesn't allow teams to sit back or bail out as early in ends as they have been. So I do wonder if that could, not only just the fact that you can't tick itself reduces potentially the idea of, oh, let's just play for this blank because the stones are there in play, but also because you can't do it later in the game, it's a less appealing strategy decision. Yeah, and for sure, it brings more rocks into play. It makes it more interesting to watch. Just the venue, choosing the World Championships to debut these. I know these are World Championships that don't, quote unquote, don't matter as much when it comes to Olympics, but there's still, teams competing for World Championships that are playing rules they've never played before, which
Mhm.
seems a bit counterintuitive.
Yeah, like you say though, it's probably the Grand Slams is where to run these rule changes. The thing about doing it at say a junior Bs or even the junior As or any sort of other event is that the caliber of player isn't as good. So you don't
Yeah.
quite get the sense of how it would play at the top level. It's kind of like when Major League Baseball does things at the low minor leagues. I mean, those are good players, yes, but it doesn't give you a true sense of how to play at the major league level when it's the best players and how they
No.
will use the rules. So if you're going to try it, this is the year to try it at a world championship. And hey, if Anna Hasselberg wins and people are like, well, it doesn't count as a real world championship because of that tick rule, then we have a big problem in curling.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, not ideal.
no. All right. We mentioned, or Scott, you mentioned Korea. They were undefeated going into that game against Madeline Dupont. They've had a great week so far in Jun Kim, but they still have the power players left to go. They have not played Canada, Sweden, or Switzerland yet. So see how they stack up once they get to those top 3 teams. But terrific week for them so far. The Swiss continue to be the class of the field. They are undefeated at this point, having already played the Swedes and the Canadians. So there's nothing here, Scott, to suggest that going into the playoffs that we shouldn't expect Tirinzoni and Elena Pats to be the favorites.
Yeah, of course. Looking at the statistics, their last stone efficiency so far this week, 67%. The force efficiency is at 79. They're just completely dominating the other teams. They've also stolen 11 ends and only given up 1. That's a pretty good recipe for winning curling games. Sweden also up there when it comes to the last stone efficiency. And those are the top 2 teams in the field in terms of plus minus. So, the numbers are bearing it out. Their play on the ice is bearing it out. Sweden, of course, just lost that game to Carrie Anderson and Team Canada. Canada a little further behind in the plus minus than you would like to see. And another place that they've been a bit behind, Sean, is in the last stone draw. So,
of course, this is our great national export at this point. Poor shooting at these events.
Poor draw shot challenge. So listening to the broadcasts, Russ has picked up on it that the ice has been a little tricky for Carrie and the team so far. Different paths are running at different speeds. Talk of the pebble being a bit sharper. Okay. But this is the thing. They've managed to climb into the 6th position. So they're middle of the field, pretty close to Sweden, actually. But for a team that has aspirations to win this, you want to see them a little further up just to ensure that they get that tiebreaker position. Because if it comes down to something between 2nd place and 3rd place, say if we're giving Switzerland 1st place, that's huge. That's an extra game, right?
It is for sure. I think, though, they do have it on their racket right now in that if you look at the teams who are at 2 losses, which of course they are, Sweden has 2 losses, the Danes have 2 losses, and the Americans have 2 losses. Korea is at 1 loss, and Canada still gets to play Korea and the Americans and have beaten Denmark and Sweden. So if they win out, unless the Swiss also drop to 2, then they will have beaten everybody else who at this moment has the chance to be at 2 losses and would get that spot, and it doesn't come down to draw shot challenge. So it is on their racket in that sense, that if they win out and the Swiss don't suffer some sort of a calamity, that they do have the pole position right now, or not the pole position, but they have it in their control to get that 2nd place spot without having to come to that. But it is nice to see that they have improved over the course of the week. And you've gotten that sense in the broadcast and just in watching them play that they're getting more comfortable with the ice, certainly changing conditions. And it's interesting too that, if you're looking in the crowd, when they show the crowd, especially when they're on the end sheets, it's like the sheet opposite of where they're playing, plenty of good seats available, but right where they're playing, like the crowd is there, which is fair enough. They're the host team, and that's what you're seeing. But today apparently it was raining this morning in Prince George. Then everyone's crowded around that sheet. You could see the frost, and you could see
Yeah.
that the conditions weren't ideal for playing. Now, of course, both teams are on them, but it's trickier when you have those changing conditions sheet to sheet. It's harder to pick up on it. But it seems like they're doing a pretty good job. And Val Sweeting's playing out of her head. Well, not really out of her head. She does this a lot now. But the shot she made in the 10th end, that triple peel, just a remarkable shot, and really kind of ended the game.
Yeah. And in the games where Canada lost, including that, what was their early loss to Norway? The game they lost to Norway. Val really didn't play well. I think she shot 60-something%. And you could tell that was really not setting them up in the position they needed to be for Kerry to take advantage and get those multiples, which is kind of the opposite of what we saw in the last two games against Japan. Well, I guess before today, Japan and Denmark, where they were scoring those multiple points when they had Hammer converting, getting the threes even, which really allowed them to run away with the games.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really great performances. And this is when you want to really start to be peaking as we head into the playoffs. Of course, they were supposed to play Scotland tonight. They do not. I mentioned it earlier. Everyone is going to get a win. Just add it on to the standings right now. Unfortunate news for Scotland. First time for those for that team to be there and to get those positive tests, not be able to participate. Last report that I read is that everyone is feeling as well as possible under the circumstances. So we certainly hope for a good recovery or a quick recovery for the team. But unfortunate news, not only for the team, but for the event as a whole. You hate to see something like that come in. Good that at least so far, none of the other teams have had any issues with COVID, and just cross our fingers that it stays that way for the rest of the week.
Yeah. I mean, it sort of defies logic that nobody else has COVID at this event, right?
A little bit. It is a little weird, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Like, I've been in the Ottawa Curling Club when people who have subsequently tested positive, and I didn't get it. So, like, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Whatever.
It is.
We're having fun watching curling, right?
It is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So elsewhere, we mentioned sort of the glut of teams now at 2 losses. Again, it's interesting to look at who still has that Scotland spot. Like, the Americans still have that Scotland spot. They're at 2 losses. Denmark doesn't, also at 2 losses. So it does kind of just change the formula of how you think of it. Like, with one extra game that you actually have to play versus that free win that is coming up. You currently have 7 teams that are competing for the 6 playoff spots. Japan is at 4-3. Then, as we said, the teams at 2 losses: Canada, Sweden, Denmark, the Americans, Korea at 1 loss, and the Swiss. Scott, out of those 7 teams, based on what you've seen, and of course, certainly the remaining schedule influences it, but who do you think is the team that is on the outside looking in when we get to Friday night?
I think it could be Denmark still, Sean. They've got to take care of business against the teams that they can beat. Like they still have Japan, they still have Switzerland, they still have USA. I could see them falling down for sure. USA, of course, still has Sweden, Switzerland, Canada, but they also get the benefit of that Scotland game still. So, as you mentioned, I like the way they're playing too. I like them for that playoff position. So on the outside looking in, right now, I would bet Norway to be on the outside looking in of those teams.
They weren't even in the teams that I listed.
Okay, they were the 8th team.
Yeah, so Germany and Norway are down at 4 losses. Yeah, we shouldn't totally discount them. So really, could we put it up to 9 teams? Kristen Skaslien has that nice win over Canada for her, and that team. They still get the Czechs. They get Denmark. They can bring them back. They get the Japanese still. They can bring them back. They have the Scotland slot still left on their schedule, so they can get to 7 wins still. Like, even more.
Yeah.
Right. They could get to 8 still in theory. I believe they still have to play the Swiss, so they can still get there. The Czechs, not the Czechs, the Germans, sort of tough so far for Daniela Jentsch and her team. They still have to play Canada, and the Swiss and the Swedes. So it's going to be tough for Daniela Jentsch down at 4 losses to keep it to 7-6 or 8-5. But there's still a chance for her. But given that schedule, I don't have a lot of hope. I would have a little more for Kristen Skazlian to claw her way back, and potentially, given her schedule, she could drop Japan down to her loss level and then have a tiebreak potentially over her. And same with Madeline Dupont. So there's a chance still for Kristen Skazlian, I would say, more than Daniela Jentsch, just looking at the schedule.
Yeah. So I'll bet then, of the 7 teams you mentioned initially, that the winner of the Denmark against Japan game
gets it,
will be that 6th playoff spot.
Okay, good stuff.
So that'll be a big one to watch.
Yeah. Elsewhere, Italy 1-6, Turkey 0-7. They of course will get a win. They will not go fully undefeated, but we'll see if they get a win in any of their games. The team hasn't played great, but Yildiz has made some great shots on the updates. That's sort of what we said going into it. She can play.
Yeah. Oh, she can play for sure. And the depth isn't quite there for Turkey right now, but it's exciting for them to get this opportunity. Yes, they will get a win. We'd like to see them get a win on the ice too, under their belts.
Yeah, and the Czechs are also in this situation where their one win is against Scotland. It's in the Scotland. Actually, they won that game. That's a game they actually played. They won 10-9. Yeah. So it could be a situation where, hey, maybe Turkey beats the Czechs, and then everyone has won a game on the ice.
And Sean, so Japan and Denmark are playing right now, so we should try to get this posted ASAP. So,
well, no, just because we don't know the winner of the game as we record this doesn't mean that your proclamation of the winner of that game gets the spot. That doesn't change that.
You're right. That doesn't change that. But just so people know, it's 5:30
Eastern time on Wednesday as we record this. Yeah. So that's sort of the situation from the women's world right now. I do want to clarify something from our last episode, and I want to thank Kelly Rae Snyder and Ling, the great Ling from the Hong Kong national team, who both wrote to us to point us to the way we can clarify the situation with Russia at the Women's World Championship, because we noted that the Czechs were in, and I believe I said, well, what about Latvia? They were the last team out at the World Qualification event. So both of them, thank you for sending this in. I thought it was important that we correct this, that the Latvian women were offered the spot and they declined it due to the short timeline to the beginning of the championship. They couldn't get everything together to get there. Then the World Curling Federation offered the spot to Finland, which was the 4th place finisher at the World Qualification event, and they were also unable to accept the spot. So they went to the 3 highest teams in the world rankings who had not yet qualified, and each offered them at the same time. And the Czech Republic was the highest ranked of those and accepted it. And one of the teams, so Hong Kong was included in that list. And so Ling said that they would have played if it got to them, but the Czech Republic accepted before them. So I just wanted to clarify that so that Latvia was in fact offered the spot first, and then Finland. So they did go with the World Qualification event as the first measure of it. Unfortunately, those teams could not participate in the event. And further to that, on the men's side, Finland did accept the spot. On the men's side, I guess because they have more time to get everything ready, and they lost the game to the Dutch in the World Qualification event, that last play-in game at the World Qualification event. So on the men's side, Finland is going to get the spot based off of the World Qualification event.
Okay.
Just wanted to clarify that.
Yes, thanks for that.
And thanks to Kelly and Ling for letting us know that we should do that. And I'll just say, if you're on a podcast, potentially a curling podcast, and you're correcting something that was incorrect from a previous one, just correct it and say that we got it wrong and we apologize, and don't blame the people who are listening for misconstruing the very clear words that came out of your mouth.
Exactly.
Elsewhere, in this Russia stuff, we should note that today, as we record this, the WCF announced the replacements for Russia at the mixed doubles championship and the World Curling and the World Juniors, which is coming up in Yongping later this spring. So Spain is taking the spot at the mixed doubles worlds, and at
good.
the World Juniors, it's going to be Scotland on the women's side, and on the men's side, it will be Korea.
Very good. Very good. Glad to hear that those replacements are there.
Yeah. Do you want to hear
Ready to go.
something potentially upsetting to your household, though?
Oh, Hungary didn't get it?
The Hungarian women were offered it and were unable to take the offer. They declined as they were unable to send a team on that short of a notice.
Yeah, too bad. The Hungary, I think it was the men's team that had the issues at the junior Bs. Or maybe it was the women's team as well. But that's too bad. That's too bad.
Yeah. So we now have full rosters for those events. Everything else that Russia was scheduled to participate in, they're open events. So no replacement teams need to be declared. So that is all settled for this year. See what happens next year.
Very good.
All right. Speaking of next year, Scott, we got some team announcements.
Do we ever? Are these sourced, Sean? Are these properly sourced?
So we are only going to talk about the ones that have been officially officialized. And that's for a couple of reasons. One of which is that one of the reported new teams that came out of the highly publicized report has not been accurate. So for some of them were right. Like, credit where credit's due. Some of them were right. But certainly in one case, it was not accurate. So we're just going to do the official ones because there's enough meat on that proverbial bone to talk about the official ones, I think.
Okay, let's do that.
All right. So let's start with the teams that are staying together. Krista McCarville and Glenn Howard, I think, are the two big ones there that have announced that there will be no changes. Krista McCarville and her team did so in the more entertaining way by talking about how they wanted to make a change, but they couldn't find a player. So very, very excited to see the four of them together. I did watch Krista on that curling show, and it was interesting to hear her talk about the changes that they will make moving forward. Potentially having Rick go to Sudbury to practice more one-on-one with who lives in Sudbury? Which one of them lives in Sudbury?
Kendra Lilly lives in
Kendra
Sudbury.
Lilly. So that there's more on ice time between Rick and her, maybe having Kendra go to Thunder Bay a little more frequently to practice. So they're looking at changes, just not lineup changes there. So kind of interesting to hear her perspective on what they want to do. And again, very Scotties focused for them as opposed to an Olympic focus, that they're focused on that national championship. And then Glenn Howard was just Glenn Howard and talking about how he just wants to play. He has a good time, going to keep going. Joked that he was worried that the team might retire before he does. As they're starting to get old now. And I noticed someone in the comments, they didn't pick up on it. I know it's hard when you're doing those live shows to see all the comments, but one of the comments that came in was like, how far are we away from a 3-generation Team Howard? I don't know how old Scott's kids are, how old the oldest one is. I think still toddler age, but maybe.
Yeah, I think so. But that'd be fun. Like we could see that.
Yeah, I think it'd be a fun thing. I'm sure at some point, God willing, that they'll be at least in a fun spiel somewhere in Penetanguishene, and the three of them will play together in some capacity.
Yeah, we'll bring them up here for the Gordy Perry.
Yeah, that's right. And Grandpa can hang out with all the other old curlers who are playing the Gordy Perry. And, yeah, it'll be fun.
That'd be really fun. Really fun.
Yeah. So Glenn did also intimate that he presented it to the guys as one more year. So who knows what that means in Glenn Howard talk. So maybe it will actually be one more year, or maybe it does become more of a hybrid situation. He talked about playing so much in the fall and so quickly after his accident last year that it really hurt his knee. So how much can he play given the amount that they have traditionally played? Like, one of the reasons they're so highly ranked is volume. They're a good team, but they don't win a lot of events. They make playoffs and have a lot of events on their schedule. So is it a situation where Scott's going to start to skip more of those? You get a hybrid scenario. I don't know. What do you think for them?
Yeah, I think, we saw them win Ontario with Scott skipping. So that's sort of the passing of the torch, so to speak. So yeah, I could see definitely what do you say, more of a hybrid approach, like you said, where some spiels Glenn plays, some spiels he doesn't. Making sure that his body's in shape for those Ontario playdowns, I think, is going to be important to them going forward. Like they're obviously still capable, right? Still capable to win, and making sure that Glenn, who's one of the best throwers ever, is in prime game shape for those big events is going to be what their focus should be until he decides he doesn't want to. And at the same time, then Scott can like get better, get more reps skipping, because obviously he's talented enough to do it and will eventually skip one day his own team.
Yeah, I wonder if they could do something to make it a little easier on Glenn, where you kind of do the Russ Howard, Brad Gushu thing, where Glenn calls the game, maybe throws lead. We've seen Kerry Galusha do that, or throw a second or something, because all those the other three of them can all throw, no question about it. But maybe you do have that situation. You get Scott used to throwing the 4 stone more regularly without the added issue of having to skip, without that added pressure on it, and that's maybe a way to ease him into skipping a little more. Not necessarily that he needs it, obviously, as having won Ontario, but something there. Or they just play and like have they do have a good time.
They do.
So we saw that elsewhere on that curling show. Brad Gushu was on, and Brett Gallant confirmed to be leaving that team. No word, confirmed word on who the 5th or on who the 4th is going to be. EJ Harnden is going to go to the World Championship with them, so speculation there exists. There would be question though about what that means longer term, because somebody would have to move to Newfoundland for that situation to work. Maybe it's Jeff Walker. I don't know.
Maybe somebody already lives in Newfoundland.
Maybe.
So
Brad Jacobs, as we talked about last week, he's not going to play. I thought he was very candid on that curling show. Of all the people who were on, I think he was. He gave us the most, I think, of anybody who was on that show on Monday night, and just very clear about. I'm going to sit back. I don't know if I want to play anymore. But definitely a year, maybe more. Talked about the intensity that they played with, and consciously, like real conscious effort on that team to kind of rein it in. And we've talked on the show a lot about what we saw in Ottawa in 2017, and that was not a team that could win, given the amount of pressure that they had put on themselves. It manifested itself in very negative ways. So I thought that was a really interesting discussion and sort of evolution of Brad Jacobs. And then probably the biggest headline in terms of the new teams that we've had is Kaitlyn Lawes is going to go back to skipping. She is going to stick with Jocelyn Peterman at the second position. Of course, they've played together for the past 4 years with Jennifer Jones, but they are picking up Kristen McCush as the lead and Selena Negevin at third. Last week I mentioned for Tracy Fleury, it was like, oh, could you get somebody better than Selena Negevin? And I was thinking of it from Tracy Fleury's perspective. I probably didn't have a choice because Selena Negevin looks like she just made that decision to go with Kaitlyn Lawes. The only thing I'll say about this team, a great team, no question. Up and down, all 4 of them are very good players. And I feel kind of weird saying this, but is Kaitlyn Lawes too good to be a skip? Like, is she too good of an all-around player to be a skip, to be standing there for 6 rocks an end? Is that almost a waste of how good she is at judging and sweeping?
Yeah, that's interesting, Sean. That I understand that sentiment and that thought, and honestly, you might be right. Thing is, you're not losing much, with the other 3 members of that team when it comes to sweeping and judging stones and all that. So if you're taking like a 100 out and putting back a 95, yeah, you're losing a bit, but maybe not enough to be important.
Right.
And if Kaitlyn is, making the shots, maybe even making the shots a little better because she's not recovering from sweeping. Maybe that's just me when I'm like
Right.
huffing and puffing after going post to post. She doesn't have to worry about that. But, maybe her shooting percentage or how comfortable she feels in the hack comes up a little bit. And then she's already an amazing shot maker, and it might have some room to grow, not sweeping.
Yeah, and certainly she's a national champion skip already at the junior level, so certainly
Yeah.
she can do it and can surround herself with players who are good enough to do it. So yeah, it's one of those things. I felt the same way when Adrian Arsenault became the anchor of the National.
Mm.
I was like, yeah, I
Yeah.
know it's an important job and it's a promotion, but she's so good as a field reporter. Like she's too good to sit in a studio. Right? She's
Yeah.
really good at the anchor job, but she was so good as a reporter. That's sort of the same reaction that I have here. Like, yeah, the last two shots are the most important two shots at the end. So you want someone as good as Caitlin Laws throwing it, but she does so many things so well. Like, so that'll be a really fun team to watch. And I'm really curious to see where it lands now with Tracy Fleury, what Tracy Fleury ends up deciding to do, where she finds a home.
Mm-hmm.
She obviously has the birthright in Northern Ontario. She can go back to Northern Ontario. She could potentially be an import for somebody else across the country. Are there players in BC who might want to do something in terms of a province that might be a little more open now that Marianne Arsenault is stepping away? Potentially Saskatchewan, Robert Silvanagel. There's sort of players there who need folks to curl with. So I'll be really curious to see what happens there with Tracy Fleury. The other lineup on the women's side that is getting some attention is that, for as much as I like the statements, and yeah, you can put your sponsors' names at the bottom of your statement, that's all well and good. Saying that you're going to announce your new team member on your sponsor's podcast is brilliant, and doing that 5 days in advance. And when your sponsor is a betting website, and people like John Cullen are now going to come up with odds for who the player is going to be, it's a very brilliant synergy of sponsorship and interest. And that's what Rachel Homan and her team have done on Friday on the Cool Bet podcast. They're going to announce who their fifth or who their fourth player is going to be. And interestingly enough, Scott, they said who our lead is going to be. So there's not going to be a shift of Sarah going to lead and finding a second. Like the post they put out very clearly said who is going to be our new lead.
So Sean, knowing nothing, what would be the most fun announcement?
The most fun in terms of what?
Yeah.
Like what would get us, like what would get the most interest and all that?
Yeah,
Like,
well, for me, the most fun would
is Lisa Weigel.
It's Lisa Weigel, right? That would be so great.
Yeah, Lisa Weigel's the one that would generate the most. Like what? Like that would be all gifs and just react. Like there wouldn't be any analysis of it, right? It would just be like, what? Yeah, that would be the most crazy, like fun one.
There would be some pretty fun Peaches and Herb gifs of reunited. But anyway, we said we wouldn't speculate, but that would be pretty fun.
That would
for
be fun.
The Twitter explosion.
Yeah, and they have a weird dynamic in terms of who they can pick, in that they kind of have the whole country to pick from because they all have birthright in Ontario. So if they want to keep playing out of Ontario, like they can pick anybody from anywhere. If there's some desire for them to play out of Alberta, I don't know why there would be, but potentially there could be, then they have to pick an Alberta player because Emma Miskew still lives in Ottawa. So that would be the dynamic there. So unlike some other teams that are looking for players and might need to finagle sort of where they live, this team has the whole country to pick from, and that makes it even more interesting.
Yeah, for sure. It's wide open, and it'll be fun to hear an announcement on a podcast by the actual teams.
Yeah. All right. So anything else, Scott, on the team stuff that we haven't touched on from either last week or this week? Any other things that stand out to you on the roster shakeups?
Yeah, real quick. Laura Walker announced that she and Jeff are expecting a new baby, and as a result, has decided to focus mostly on mixed doubles with Kirk Myers for at least the next year. So, that'll be another name from both the men's game and women's game stepping into more of a mixed doubles focus, which is pretty interesting and pretty easy to say in the first year of a quad, before some other teams might come knocking on your door.
Yeah.
But I'm excited for that. They were a good team playing together for the last 4 years, and I think will continue to be. I guess 3 years.
Yeah, but the statement does say, Scott, that their focus is 2026.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it'll be interesting. Like, I certainly understand from Laura's perspective, a little surprising from Kirk Myers to not play on the men's side, but that does allow them more flexibility in the schedule overall. They can certainly play the same amount as they have been if they choose to, given that Laura's going to give birth at some point soonish. They probably won't play a super heavy schedule in the early fall, but they can pick up as they go. But yeah, it just allows that flexibility. Where's Jeff when he's off and playing? It's not necessarily going to be all the same events, and like, so they can. There's that personal flexibility that you get from doing it, but also really to me, this is. I know John Morris did it, but John Morris is really an outlier in so many ways in the sport. But this is kind of the first, or I would say the highest profile duo to kind of step back from the 4-person game and really focus on the mixed doubles.
Yeah, and Kirk's partner Claire, I believe, moved to Toronto or is moving to Toronto for work.
I thought it was Ottawa. I thought she was Ottawa based.
Oh, that's perhaps, yeah. So maybe we'll see him around the club. There
you go. Yeah, I thought she got like the Senators beat or something.
Oof.
We'll have to fact check that one next week.
Is that a promotion? I don't know. But fellow UBC Thunderbird,
when they're in the Stanley Cup Finals in a couple of years, Scott.
Okay. I'm sure I'll really eat my words.
That's another time for me to be able to post the Denmark dancing photos. Really, anytime that you're wrong, I will just post that video of Madeline Dupont.
Yeah, that's great. Where did you find that?
That's how they ended the broadcast.
Oh, so you did get back on the broadcast just in time to see that. Love it.
Came back during Kathy was interviewing Val, and then as they went to commercial, they showed Denmark dancing. It's great.
Yeah, good for them. For them.
All right, yeah. So exciting news there, I think, and certainly that continued transformation of the mixed doubles game here in Canada, and the way players, high level players, elite level players from the 4-person events are treating it, and we'll see how that now manifests over the next quad as we get into it. So I think that might be it, Scott. Unless there's something else I'm missing that we wanted to talk about.
That's it for me, I think. Yeah, that's all good.
Oh, wait, no, Scott, there is one more thing that I wanted to talk about. Our friend Jerry from Belgium. He reached out about a bonspiel that they're holding, the Godin Carolus Classic, in May of 2022. Now, I apologize that I'm sure my pronunciation is not going to be quite right. I've spent some time in Belgium, and my pronunciation, I've been told by the locals, is not exactly on point on some of these terms. But this is an event that is going to be taking place from the 26th to the 29th of May over there in Belgium. All the information on it, if you happen to be over there, and want to play in it, we'll link to it in the show notes. Jerry talks about it as being a real fun time, like a relaxed bonspiel, a cool place. You have some drinks. It's the end of the season spiel. They have an outdoor terrace, so kind of a fun time. So and Jerry is on the board of the Zemst Curling Club, which is where this event is taking place. So just wanted to highlight that fun looking bonspiel in Belgium, and Jerry, if we can ever get over there at that time of year, looks like a fun time.
Yeah, it does look like a fun time. I'm, I'll be in Belgium, but not in May. Darn.
Right. And I'll be there again, not in May. So
yeah,
maybe one year. There's a couple on our list now, Scott.
We do have
fun
a
events
couple.
we want to go to.
Yes.
Yeah,
I would. Oh,
yeah, the outdoor one in South Dakota. Montana,
Idaho.
Idaho. I was wrong on both
Come
of
on,
my
Sean.
guesses. The outdoor one in Idaho it's called the SOB. I can't remember what the S stands for. But yeah, that one looks really good. We want to get out to San Francisco. They got their facility open. I'd like to go back to Pittsburgh. They got their facility. Atlanta, I kind of regret that we didn't make a trip out to Peachtree when we were there in 2019.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of places we want to go and play. So hey, if you got fun spiels that you want to let us know about, certainly feel free to reach out, because I love hearing about some of these fun bond spiels.
Yes, we'll. Like you said, we've added another one now to our list.
Yeah. I haven't played a spiel in 3 years.
I know. I'm just thinking about travel getting more and more open. So yeah, definitely want to get out and spiel, as long as I can get my back in shape.
Yeah, you got to get yourself straight here. Yeah. Big game Saturday, Scott. Big game Saturday.
Big game. And then we got to turn around and go on Monday again. Oof.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough. Gonna have to get into that recovery room. Yeah. Get things going.
Rub down. Yeah.
Well, that will do it for us this week, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. If you have not yet, please do subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. Do the likes, ratings, comments, all that good stuff helps us grow the show. Do head on over as well to GameOfStonesPod.com. You can find all of our past episodes there, plus a link to the merch with all proceeds from the t-shirts going to Food Banks Canada, and the rest of the stuff proceeds to the Sandra Schmirler Foundation. We are matching all of those proceeds as well. And of course, you can follow along with everything we got going on Twitter and Instagram at Game of Stones Pod. Facebook is Game of Stones Podcast. And if you want to let us know what you want to hear on the show, Game of Stones Podcast at gmail.com. So that's going to be that. Some late nights coming up, although they have adjusted the schedule for the Eastern time zone, Scott. 7 p.m. Eastern final on Sunday night, 4 p.m. Pacific time. Thank you, TSN. I appreciate it, because not only is that a reasonable time for me, it also is after the Canadian men's soccer match, in which if they haven't fully qualified for the World Cup by then, hopefully they do it Sunday, and there'll be a big party in that game in Toronto. So it should be a fun sports Sunday, Scott.
And Sean, don't forget, the Academy Awards are on Sunday night.
Oh, I had forgotten, and I will forget again.
Okay.
Who's the best pitcher? Who wins?
I don't know. I'll be watching, but
last year you watched all the movies.
Almost all the movies last year. Yeah, I've watched quite a few. Well, I got a couple in the queue still to watch that I'm interested in watching. Of the ones I've watched so far, I don't know. I like that Disney one and Kanto. That was fun.
Okay, yeah. All right, so that'll win Best Animated.
I don't know. Sure.
Heard it here first. Scott, well, maybe it's a good thing you hurt yourself if you still got movies you got to watch.
I still do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, enjoy everything going on. We'll be back with you next week to talk all about the Women's World Championship, who's standing tall at the end of the week. And we'll start to look ahead to the Men's World Championship out in Las Vegas, which is kicking off a week from Saturday. So still a lot going on in the world of curling, and we will be here to talk about it with you. So until we chat again, keep those brooms on the ice and don't dump that intern.
Make the final.